BizTech's technology show. Today, we take a deep dive into artificial intelligence and its industrial and enterprise level applications. Now, to help us understand this fascinating area, we speak to Leonard Lee. He's the president of Beyond Limits APAC. Now, Beyond Limits is an industrial and enterprise-grade artificial intelligence company built for most sectors, including energy, utilities, and healthcare. Now, Leonard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Now, Leonard, for a start, could you just give us a deeper understanding of Beyond Limits and your history since you started in 2014?
Yeah, happy to share. So the company was a spin-off of the Caltech University in Pasadena in California. And one of our, early technology heritage is that our AI was first built to power the Mars rover back 20 plus years ago. So the head of AI for the rover program is now our CTO for the company. So we have basically NASA, Caltech, JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab, technology heritage, and we took some of that IP and we commercialized it. And initially in the oil and gas industry, because BP was one of our early investors and a huge strategic partner to us. So British Petroleum really helped us shape our early, technology and solutions in the oil and gas space, from upstream to midstream to downstream in the value chain. So that's kind of the origin of the business. And since then, we've moved into, smart manufacturing, smart utilities, and basically industrial use cases of hybrid and cognitive AI.
Now, you're the president for Asia. What does your footprint look like in the Asia Pacific region?
Yeah, so, I've always done business in Asia, regardless of, which company it was. But I think for Beyond Limits, we are headquartered in Singapore. And we have an ASEAN Singapore operation out of Singapore as well. And then we have local full-fledged teams in China, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, and in Japan as well. So our footprint on the ground, we're about almost 100 people across these locations. And obviously, Greater China is a huge market. And of course, Singapore and Southeast Asia is also a huge market for us. And this is after kind of 2 years of since inception in the Asia Pacific region.
And I would think that looking at your footprint and what you've just described, Singapore will be the springboard to the rest of ASEAN.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as with many other industries and companies, Singapore is very, pro-business. It's a good hub for talent. It's an easy travel, hub to be based out of. So yeah, Singapore is a hub for the region. But Southeast Asia is very exciting. I think the likes of Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, these are clearly our target markets out of our ASEAN office.
And besides oil and gas, which, as you mentioned, is your core, and that's where you started from, you also have applications in the healthcare and financial services sector, correct? How is that going in the Southeast Asian region?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think different markets have different focus. So for us, I think Singapore has been interesting sort of health tech market, and in particular around remote patient monitoring, for example, where the use of AI to monitor patients that are off site, so not in the hospital or not in the high dependency ward, but you can basically give them the same level of care, whether they're at home or in the case of medical tourism, they could be like literally back in Kuala Lumpur when they did an operation 2 days ago in Singapore, for example, right? So that's some of the areas we're looking into, and also around the healthcare operations. So a lot of people think, AI in healthcare is like looking at X-ray of cancer images. And so that's one way. Computer vision is helpful in that. But actually in the running of the hospital, the hospital, if you look at a hospital operations, there's a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure the service level, when the patient checks in to the point they enter some preparation before procedure, post procedure, and then the billing, and then the leaving the hospital. So AI can really help in the operations of the hospital on top of some of the clinical use cases.
Leonard, you basically outlined two key applications. I worked in healthcare for 5 years, including healthcare consulting. So I understand the inefficiencies that are in healthcare compared to other industries like banking. So this is where artificial intelligence can really help, particularly as you mentioned in telemedicine and also in operations. Could you give us some use cases perhaps or customer success stories in your healthcare applications?
Yeah, I must say, healthcare for us is still relatively new. I think, we come from the energy and oil and gas background. But I think for Southeast Asia, we are actually working with a large operator of private hospitals to look at, I think I gave you two use cases where, one is to, use computer vision for diagnostics of certain conditions. The other area is for senior living facilities, or it could be a part of the hospital, the rehab department, that you basically use computer vision to look at dangerous behavior, or old folks falling off a wheelchair, for example, or self-harm. You use computer vision to see whether somebody is trying to deliberately bang the head on the wall, or deliberately doing something that is self-harmful, and basically alert the nurse or the whoever's on site to help out. So that you can basically monitor the entire space 24/7 without hiring an army of nurses and people to provide the same level of care. Right.
And that's an amazing use case, actually, because that probably didn't exist 10 years ago. And having worked in healthcare before, I see tremendous applications for that, especially in Asia with a rapidly aging population.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a common problem across a lot of countries now. Japan and parts of Asia too. Yeah.
Now, could you then break down for us cognitive AI and how it's a differentiator perhaps in your core business, which you started from, which is the energy sector, be it traditional energy, which is oil and gas, and green energy, which is the future essentially?
Sure. So let me first start by what is cognitive AI, right? And hybrid AI is another term that's used to refer to this branch of AI. So basically, most AI, as people know it, is machine learning. So the machine, you feed the machine tons and tons of data, and they have to be labeled and cleansed and all in the right place. And then you get insights out of that data, and then you try to predict what the person or operator should do. Now, hybrid AI or cognitive AI is you combine all the machine learning and insights from the data, but combine that with expert knowledge and domain expertise or industry guideline, and you codify that knowledge into the same algorithm. And we call that a reasoner. So basically, a reasoner is a human brain equivalent plus supported by tons and tons of data that it has learned from, right? So that's in simple terms what hybrid AI and cognitive AI means. And I'll just give you a very easy to understand example, because sometimes you need a data scientist to describe hybrid and cognitive and everything else. But the easiest way to think about this is nowadays, everybody talks about autonomous driving, autonomous vehicle, right? So let's say an autonomous vehicle is going down a narrow road. You have cars parked on both sides of the road, And then the car sees a bouncing ball across its path, right? So the sensors would say, look, there's an obstacle. The car should slow down to a stop within a certain distance from the obstacle. And then once the obstacle passes by, then I can accelerate again, right? So that's a normal rules-based logic. But the ball didn't fall from heaven, right? The ball was probably some kid bouncing a ball by the footpath. And now the ball has gone onto the road, and the kid will come a few seconds after the ball to chase after the ball, right? So cognitive AI, if you had that in the car, would be the car would wait a few more seconds just to see if some other object or a kid would run after this ball. And so waiting a couple more seconds before I accelerate again. So that's the difference between just pure machine learning versus cognitive AI. And because a human being, you and I, when we drive that car, we would stop and wait a little bit longer to make sure no kid runs after that ball, right? So that's how I like to, describe the difference between.
And thanks for that, because that really simplifies and helps us wrap our heads around cognitive AI. But coming back to some of the matters at hand in the world today, the conversation is around sustainability, net zero emissions, and reducing our carbon footprint. How does AI, and particularly across the oil and gas industry, help to not only improve operational efficiencies, but also help to reduce carbon footprint and increase sustainability?
Yeah, so let's start by what we've done with AI in the traditional oil and gas, and then how AI can power the transition, energy transition, right? So when you think about AI, what it does is it optimizes systems of systems so that you can produce the output in the most efficient way. And in sort of a solution architecture way, it's basically you are managing constraints. So you have a certain constraint, whether it's the amount of input of crude oil or temperature or pressure or whatever the constraints are. And the AI solution has to optimize with all these constraints, and then you have to deliver, in the case, let's say, of a refinery, the amount of crude oil, let's say 200,000 barrels per day, and then you need to produce jet fuel and diesel and other petrochemical products to the plant, right? So there's a production plan, or what we call a linear plan, right? So AI is basically trying to optimize, given the same input, what is the maximum output you can get. So carbon.
And that's also and I want to stop you there and just ask you, because you're a leader in this, that's also subject to the constraint of, in this case, like a refinery, because certain refineries can only process certain kinds of oils, correct?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So refineries are tuned for the type of crude. We call it the sweetness, right? Whether it's sour or, crude from Indonesia is different from crude from, Saudi Arabia or China, so yes, absolutely. That's one of the constraints, is the type of crude or the feedstock, right? The type of feedstock that comes into the refinery. But now turning to, carbon reduction or carbon emission can be one of the constraints. So basically, you can use AI to optimize for carbon reduction or to lower the carbon emission in that particular process, right? So that's how you can use AI in the existing or traditional kind of, refining process, right? Now, we all know the oil companies, some of them are great customers. They know that they also have to transition. And this is, government policy, climate agreements, and COPA, and there is pressure to pivot and to transition towards green energy. So, for example, we are working with a large Japanese, hydrogen player to look at how to use AI in the whole value chain of green hydrogen production, right? So a very quick example there is to be considered green hydrogen, you need to power the electrolysis of water using renewable energy sources. So right now it's wind or solar powering the electrolysis of water to split hydrogen and oxygen, and then you store it in the form of fuel cell or green ammonia, and then you ship that back to the customer wherever they are. So if you look at that entire system, it's a very complicated system, and you have hardware makers that will supply you software to run their own hardware, but there is no software to optimize the entire value chain in this production facility, right? So that's why they've come to us to help them, again, manage the constraints and optimize the system of systems in this particular use case.
And Leonard, you bring up a very important point. And again, obviously your value proposition is around looking at the whole question of sustainability across the value chain. So a lot of times large companies in the past would look internally and their own processes in terms of, are we complying with sustainability? Today, obviously, the conversation has shifted to across our supply chain, right down to the smallest subcontractor. Are we operating in a sustainable manner? And I suppose then solutions like yours will help them to make better decisions and help them also advise the different elements within their supply chains.
Absolutely. So let me give you an example of how we are actually working on an aspect of that right away. So I think on the business side, ESG will become a topic of corporate governance, just like financial governance, SOX compliance, diversity and inclusion, and ESG will be one of these, topics of compliance. So you can expect that in the next couple of years, this will be part of, company audits, annual audits, or even pre-IPO process, due diligence. So this is going to be front and center in basically everywhere in business. Now, how we are actually supporting this and this ESG transition is that we're actually working with a company to look at renewable energy certification, or renewable energy credits. When you say this is green hydrogen, how can you verify that it is indeed green, that it was produced with renewable power sources, right? So we are using blockchain to basically verify and certify that every step of the process is compliant to the industry definition of being, green hydrogen in this case, or it could be solar power, wind farm, and so on. So that's where AI blockchain is going to be really helpful in this energy transition, because that, if you think about a green hydrogen would have a better price, and governments would pay a little more for that unit of energy versus, let's say, brown hydrogen and other colors of hydrogen. So that means you need to really verify that is truly indeed green and produced in the compliant way to fetch that higher price. The economics behind it.
And so that's an interesting discussion completely, Leonard, because essentially, which is already happening, there is tiered pricing in terms of commodities, in terms of how clean it is. And that trend is probably going to accelerate. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like organic fruit and vegetables, right? Today, you trust that the supermarket has gone to the right supplier, and you trust that it's all organic, right? Nobody, verifies, nobody shows you that, look, this is truly indeed organic, and you as the buyer can trust that, certification process, right? I think, but for energy, that's clearly the path forward.
Now, Leonard, there are a lot of competitors in your space. What makes Beyond Limits unique or special? What is your secret sauce? Why are you better than your competitors?
Yeah, I would say in the field of hybrid AI and cognitive AI, there are not too many players that have invested in building the domain knowledge. So for example, TikTok is AI, Instagram also has AI, facial recognition is AI, right? But in order to build an AI system for a refinery, you really need the decades of experience from the operator that's been running the refinery. You need, chemistry and chemical engineers, and you need all sorts of technical experts to work with the software developer, solution architect, and data scientists to build this solution. So we as a company have invested in that domain expertise, and we will invest in every new domain that we're going into. We are not just a bunch of software developers, but we hire industry veterans to come in and infuse their knowledge and domain expertise into our AI solution. So that's key. So our technology is differentiated in that it is not a generic vanilla off-the-shelf tool that you use to build your own solution. Our solutions are turnkey, end-to-end, and it's designed to specifically solve a use case with the customer. Then I would say the second part of why we are different is that we've assembled a group of really experienced business leaders and operators in different parts of the world. So as a still relatively young, late stage startup, we have basically put people. So for example, I've been in Asia, more than 10 years previously before I moved to the US. So I know the markets well, I know the channels well, even government agencies and so on. So it's really important to have people that know the regions, that have the connection and the network to help kind of accelerate your growth and entry into different regions. So we do that for Asia Pacific, and then we have colleagues in Middle East and Africa kind of doing the same. And so the combination of unique technology and also, our knowledge of the market, and if you put the two together, I think that's a formula for a successful business.
So Leonard, the limiter of technology and great technology is often people. And there's a war for talent out there. How are you attempting to address this, not only from a company perspective, but also from an industry perspective?
Yeah, that's a hot topic wherever you go nowadays, right? So even during my days at Microsoft, it is you competing with all the other big tech as well. So I think for us, our story is pretty attractive. So we look for game changers. We look for people that don't want to be part of a 100,000 person company where their contribution, it's really hard to tell, did I really move the needle today, right? By me coming to work. So for us, we look for people that really have an edge. Of course, the technical competency is a must. That's a ticket to the party, right? You got to have,
Absolutely.
If you're hiring data science, you got to be like super good at that. And if we're hiring a software developer, you got to know your stuff, right? But beyond that, it's really kind of the mindset of trying to make a difference and really trying to do something new, and also to be part of, we are late stage. We're of course looking at IPO at some point in the near future. So this story really attracts talent for us. And also, hey, our software is running on Mars, right? So how many companies can say that, right? So I think combination of the heritage, the technology, and our growth story so far that's how we attract talent to Beyond Limits.
So now Beyond Limits, what are the key things to watch out for 2022, 2023 in Asia? Obviously, in the pipeline is an IPO perhaps, but what else should we be watching out for?
Yeah, I think for us, it is, first of all, on the energy space, we are clearly driving forward with the energy transition and the use of AI to optimize and make more efficient green energy production, right? Whether it's hydrogen or solar or wind or other sources. But we want to go beyond that. So we're in smart manufacturing in Taiwan. We're looking at battery and battery life cycle management. We're looking at healthcare out of ASEAN office. And then in Japan, we're looking at hydrogen space. And so I think we're going beyond. And in China, we're working with smart utility. So whether it's a water utility, a gas utility, to again, help them be more efficient. And in that case of the utility is to reduce water wastage, for example, right? So these are some of the new areas we're getting into, new industries, and we are working with specific strategic partners in each of these new industries. And we are very excited about the region. Asia, it's one of the highest growth in whatever industry that we talk about. And we're here to stay, and we're here to grow with the region as well.
Leonard, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've really learned a lot. I'm sure the audience has as well. But before we leave, any final words you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I think it may sound cliche, but it's like AI now is probably like the internet 20 plus years ago, right? People just didn't know what the internet would do for them. And look at where we are now. So AI is kind of like that, don't be afraid of it, embrace it, work with partners and hire people that can really help with the digital transformation of all industries. So I would say AI is here, it's the future, and we all should embrace it and make it work for us, right? And embrace it moving forward.
Now, thank you for taking your time to be on the show, Leonard.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Leonard Lee, the president of Beyond Limits APAC, on BizTech's Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.